We handle a lot of dog bite cases in our office, and we're often asked what steps a person needs to take to document their case and to preserve their claim should there be one against the owner of the dog. So generally speaking, if there's a dog bite, depending on the severity, you'd want to get medical attention right away. So I've had cases, for example, where a young child was mauled by a pit bull, nearly killed, broke both arms, went for his throat, lacerations everywhere, bleeding out. It was really ugly. Obviously, in that situation, first person you're calling is 911. You're getting EMS there, ambulance there. Generally, the police will arrive as well as a product of that. If it's less severe, you don't need immediate medical attention, but you have, for example, a bite to the arm and it's open. You obviously want to do first aid, keep it clean, put pressure on it, so on and so forth. You do want to get yourself to the hospital as quickly as possible. And depending on the circumstance, you may at the time want to call law enforcement to have them come out to investigate who owns the dog. But not just that, more importantly, whether the dog has rabies or not. I mean, that's usually the main concern immediately for anybody who's bit by a dog is a dog have rabies, does it have some other communicable disease, something I need to be worried about. So you want to identify the dog, and if it's a dog at large, for example, you don't know who the owner is, you call animal control or law enforcement right away. They hopefully will come out, capture the dog. If it's chipped, they can figure out who the owner is, and that's all going to be in the records, and you can get that information later on. But ultimately, in the context of a civil claim, so let's put the medical issues aside and just taking care of yourself medically in the context of a civil claim, you want to be sure to look to see if you can't find the owner of the dog somehow. Oftentimes, it's someone you know, a neighbor, someone down the street. You can identify who owns the dog. Sometimes it's a dog at large, literally a dog wandering through the neighborhood. That's a much more difficult situation. But if you think about it, the only way to get reimbursed your medical expenses, any lost wages, so on and so forth, is to hold the dog owner responsible if it's a dangerous dog. And how do you do that? Well, you need to find out who the dog owner is. So that's oftentimes a task that is left undone when people come to my office, and there's not much we can do because you can't turn around and make a claim against the heir. You can't sue God, as they say. So you got to hold only the dog owner accountable. That's the person under Oregon law who would be responsible for the bad acts of their animal. So if you identify the owner, usually, hopefully, they would have some level of insurance, and that's what we're looking at the first level. We're looking for a homeowner's policy. We're looking for a general liability policy or an umbrella policy. If it's an animal that's a part of a business or on business property, we're looking for a business liability policy. So we're looking for some level of recovery. And most dog owners, obviously, they're not bad people. Animals are aggressive for whatever reason, and ideally, you're not making the claim against the person directly in terms of taking their personal assets to compensate yourself. Sometimes that's the only recourse, but usually, almost inevitably, there is some level of insurance involved, and that's what we're really looking at for recovery. But the only way to get there is to find out who owns the dog. And then through that person, we find out who their insurance carrier is, and through that insurance carrier, we make the claim and try to get the claim resolved. But in addition to that, so you take care of yourself medically, get law enforcement involved if appropriate, make sure you can find out who the dog owner is or make record of the dog owner itself. After that, you want to document your injuries. So if you're going to make a claim, particularly if it involves significant bodily deformation, and by that I mean tearing, bites, scarring, things of that nature, you would want to take periodic photographs. So your medical records are going to document your medical history and your medical treatment moving forward, but they don't take photographs. Generally speaking, only at the hospital I've seen any photographs taken, and maybe the plastic surgeon's office. But generally speaking, your physician, your neurologist, your orthopedic surgeon, if it's an orthopedic issue, are not going to take photographs of your injury. So you need to do that on your own because it's very difficult 2, 3, sometimes 4 years down the line to describe to a jury or to an arbitrator or to a mediator or even to the opposing insurance carrier what exactly your injuries look like, what you went through, how ugly it was. And everybody on the other side tends to minimize whatever you have to say because they just assume that you're blowing things out of proportion, you're making a civil claim, you want money, and that's something that generally works against you. Even a jury, and rightfully, they come with a level of skepticism when a person makes a claim, dog bite claim, auto accident claim, doesn't matter. And it's difficult for a jury to encapsulate and fully appreciate what exactly the individual victim of a dog bite went through without seeing the photograph, some sort of evidence that they can see with their eyes as opposed to simply relying upon what they say with their testimony. So you want to make sure, to the extent you can, document your progress, and usually photographically is sufficient because the medical doctor, so long as you're receiving periodic treatment, routine treatment, they're going to document medically what they see, what your condition is in terms of their visualization of that, what your progression is, and ultimately what your final diagnosis is, your future prognosis, and any treatment you need in the future. But ideally, if that's rebutted with photographs, it does you a world of good. Obviously, in terms of steps, you want to follow your doctor's orders. And if the doctor says, come back and see me in 4 weeks for follow-up, you want to make sure you come back and see the doctor in 4 weeks for follow-up. Even if you feel like you're on the mend, you don't really need it, you want to make sure you follow your doctor's orders, because there's a duty to mitigate your damages under Oregon law. And that means, for lack of better words, follow your doctor's orders. So if you don't follow your doctor's orders and something untoward happens, let's say you don't do that 4-week follow-up, there's an infectious process that's involved. Suddenly, I've seen it happen, you're losing digits because the infection is out of control, you're now hospitalized, you have antibiotic IVs that they need to administer, and now your medical bills are astronomical. To a certain extent, that's on you because you didn't follow your doctor's orders. I mean, that's the position the insurance carrier and the dog owner is going to take. Like, have you just followed your doctor's orders, showed up 4 weeks later, they would have recognized the infectious process, they'd have got you some antibiotics, and everything would have been cured. You wouldn't have lost your finger or your hand or worse. So that's just one example, perhaps extreme, but one example of things that we see when people don't follow their doctor's orders. So make sure you do that, obviously. And then ultimately, maybe it sounds self-serving, but at least consult with a lawyer, because the rules and regulations involving dogs, dog liability, animal liability vary. And it's fairly complicated, fairly complex. I'll do another video segment on that specifically. But there's various rules involved for a dog owner with respect to not just their dog, but different element of damages to the victim as well. And so it's a kind of a complex soup you need to look at. And that's just on the liability side. On the damages side, what are my injuries and what's it worth side, that's complex as well. It varies case to case. It really is going to depend on what your doctors have to say, what the medical records say, what the photographs show, what any permanent scarring or injuries there are. And that is a fairly complicated analysis as well. And you got to weight that against your liability risk in terms of whether or not the dog had a prior history of bites, for example. That's an easier liability case than if it's a puppy that's never bitten anybody, all of a sudden is licked, and all of a sudden it went for a child's nose and took it off. That's a much more difficult case. So again, it's very complex, both on the liability side and the damages side. I just gave you just sort of a checklist of things to do to try to preserve your claim, put it in the best position possible to capture the facts, so that the lawyer's office can look at the facts, apply those facts to the law, and give you good advice.